Alright. Oh, fuck. I always click off of it, bro. I need to see the streams up. I need to hear the sweet serenade of my own voice. Alright, cool. So it's coming through now. Alright, so this is a quick play VOD. We're gonna be looking at the DPS, who happens to go by the name of Graxons, whose POV I can't get to because of the finicky systems. So, since it's quick play, I'm really going to be looking at, things that are reoccurring frequently or large errors that happen often, or maybe just large errors in general. Some of the smaller things I'm going to try not to pay attention to too closely because it is quick play. I'm not going to look at your composition, I'm not going to look at your teammates, and I can't factor in you being able to help them or work with them because nothing that happens in terms of your teammate or you outplaying the enemy in any specific way is going to be remarkable because it was quick play. You know, we can't guarantee the mindsets of anyone. I mean, you can't do it in comp either, but at least in comp it's slightly more reliable. So you got dunked on right there. Pretty easy fix. Next time just don't get dunked on. Very simple motto to have that will help you to stop from getting dunked on is please Lord Jesus don't let Doomfist dunk on me today. So something that's happened twice now is that somebody has come up on your side and kind of just been able to gank you basically out of nowhere. If you don't know what ganking is an action in a MOBA where somebody comes on a flank and basically just bombards you. You get jumped in the corner. So that could be something that can be resolved by, you know, having a better audio setup, maybe lowering your music volume if it's a problem, nice shot, or maybe boosting specific types of audio, or possibly you just need to train your ears a little bit more to pay attention or get a better headset or something like that.
Somebody get me some healing.
So where's this Widow? Is this Widow back in her spawn? Okay, she's down main. I would have seen her if I just stayed in your POV. Unnecessary use of the concussion there. Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything else in between. There's just unnecessary use of concussion there. A little bit of a small issue like that can often become a larger one. Sometimes when a Doomfist suddenly rolls out on you after you've used the concussion, because that can mean the difference between your life and his.
Hey, I need healing. Thank you. You understood.
Sincerest apologies. Meteor strike.
So the biggest issue there was that once they rotated, you paid no mind to how they were rotating around that elephant there. So what wound up happening was, although your Sigma put up the shield to block their LOS, they kind of just moved to the side, and you didn't react to it. You stayed out in the open and took the open duel against two people at the same time. This is not an advisable use of Bob after you've lost the fight. If you had waited simply a few more seconds, Bob would have been really encouraging to help you Re-engage. Okay, so the main thing that we're going to focus on here is basically taking losing fights, right? Because a lot of the time what'll happen to DPS, and I mean, there's a lot of things that will happen to a lot of DPS because DPS tend to be one and the same, even though there's so many of them. But sometimes what'll happen to DPS, maybe that's a more apt sentence, is they'll get caught in these duels where they think they can win because they know if they hit the shot, they know if they pop off in that moment, or if their mechanics actually come to full fruition, that they should be able to win that fight. But what they fail to realize is that playing against other people means you're playing against variable levels of skill. And this coming in flux or coming in contact with the fluctuation of your own skills means that the only time you really want to be banking on yourself winning a duel is when you have to, or when you're in a full team fight, or in some sort of situation that is very do or die, right? So what's happening here is you're in the poke phase, right? And your team is currently regrouping. Now, if you had stayed alive through this fight, you would have been regrouped. But now that you've died, you've staggered out the fight, and now we have to wait for you to respawn. We meaning, this fucking team in general. So while you were taking this fight, you were a few steps back from cover, which means stepping over to the side takes a little bit longer because you have more distance between you and the wall. So there's a wider angle that you have to basically close before you can't see the Ashe anymore. And also, the enemy also had the defensive positioning where she could wait for her supports to come to, or she could have her supports already on her, already looking at her, her shield's already there to protect her, and she was only looking at one specific area. So when you turn this corner, there's a lot of space for you to look at, right? And once you hone in on her, it takes a slight adjustment, which kind of gives you a slight disadvantage. And then when she's looking, she only has to look on that left side because that's really the only spot that you're going to come from. Now, you can be clever as an attacker and come from the right. You can come wide from the left or the right or close. But in most cases, especially in kind of lower ranks, you're going to be coming from the same side every time. And while you're going to be looking around because you don't know where she's going to be, she has to just look in one spot. I can give a much better explanation of this if we go into customs. So please, if you don't know, ask about the advantages of being close and far from a corner, so that we can kind of go over those if you don't understand them. But basically, the peak before this was, or this peak is bad because you're in the regrouping phase, and she has her supports behind her. You don't want to be taking hard standing peeks into an enemy that has support behind her. And while your supports were already, or almost there, or at least already there for the most part, they weren't prepared for you to be taking that sort of duel. Now, I'm pretty sure the Mercy will be able to res you. Let's see if she has res even up in the first place. 5 seconds, she might be able to get off in time. But that's now costing resources because you decided to take a peek that was fairly unnecessary during the regroup phase. The real travesty, however, because you could have maybe won that fight, is this peek over here that I was talking about before. So let's rewind to go back to that moment. This one right here. Okay, so your Sigma throws up his shield and he throws it a decent distance down. Wait, no. Your Sigma is going to throw up his shield. Or did he take it down? Okay, I'm sorry. A little bit all over the place in terms of telling you what's going on. This is, I'm not podcast ready yet, you know? Alright, so your Sigma's throwing up a shield. You're looking for the angle. You're still very far away from this corner, let's just note, so getting into cover is going to take a little bit of time, and with latency, this can sometimes mean that you're just going to die straight out. Your Sigma is going to put up his shield. So the enemies, after seeing your Sigma put up his shield, are simply going to rotate around this elephant here, right? You know? And while this might not happen all the time, this definitely gives a clean sight line onto you. So from your perspective, you can see them rotating right here. So once they've rotated around, you can see this, and you're still a decent distance away from the corner itself, although on, like, let's say from here left to right, you're not too far because you're a bit further back. The angle's a bit wider, though it doesn't matter once you're head on as much. But you're still a little bit far. You could be much closer so that you're a bit more protected. You want to basically put it so that your reticle is on the enemy and the wall at the same time, pretty much. You know, you put the left side of your reticle, like, basically line it up with the wall to hide as much as your hitbox as possible. But once they make this rotation, you're not going to do anything. You're discorded, and you're taking a technical 2v1 that's then shooting straight in your direction. So you are taking peeks so far and fights that are poorly timed and duels that are mismatches, you know? They're not in your advantage in any way. Sure, you're not always looking for an advantage, but you're not even in the neutral yet. You're not even fighting a fair fight. You're fighting 2v1s, and you're fighting during a regroup stage where somebody has a set in position, right? So again, you're going to come wide across this angle, which is going to mean that closing in on getting to cover is going to cost you more. So the Mercy's on you for a second. She's going to start putting you to full, but the enemy Ashe is going to have a Mercy pocket, and she's going to, you know, hit those headshots and chip you down. And I'm sure for the most part that it's not going to matter whether you're alive or not, because it's quick play. But you could very well have been the difference maybe in pushing this fight a little bit easier, or you would have you missing out on ult charge can matter later. When you're playing competitive or when you're playing in scrims or actual matches, these picks are going to matter a lot. So you're going to want to be able to negate them by using cover more effectively and by not taking disadvantaged fights during 4 times, you know?
Let's clean up.
So the Doomfist is going to clean you up because you get staggered, your team pushes in, and then there's a gap of space between your tank's awareness and of where you are and, like, where you are. So the Doomfist just kind of, like, closes that distance and cleans you up, and nobody can protect you. And it's a Doomfist, so what are you really going to do once you get in that position? You either hit the headshots or you don't.
Don't think we'll be taking a family vacation here anytime soon.
So some of this goes back to what I was saying previously one time when we were talking about your play, Graxons. Some of the angles you take at times are negligent of other angles, right? So your play style almost seems challenging in a way, like you're daring the enemies to be better than you, because you know that you can aim better than them. But what winds up happening most of the time is because you're daring them to aim better than you, is that they're not aiming better than you. They're just deciding to outclass you in different ways, by having multiple people shoot you at once, by catching you out of position, or catching you off at times where they have an advantage. If you can negate these deaths, you could probably still get like, you could get further easier by simply negating these deaths, you know, by getting into spots where only one enemy can see you at a time, or by working on dueling people. Nice shots. Like, you can hit these shots, yes, and you can, like, you just got 3 kills for basically free, but if that Ashe kills you, then you put yourself at a much more significant disadvantage. It's a very much a bang or bust kind of play. I think in that situation there was a lot better because a lot of the enemy team was regrouping and still getting into position. I think in the example before, the Ashe was set. Her feet were in place. She was good to go.
Much better. Thank you. Damage was ending. Let me handle it. Let's get you back.
Nice, nice concussion. Big hook by the Roadhog. I think a representative of your positioning too being maybe not exactly what it could be is the fact that when you get hit down to low health, you can't contribute to the fight at all. You spend a lot of time, excuse me, looking for the healers and
Nothing wrong with
trying
a little
to
self-improvement.
find your way around the fight without being caught out. I think if you had slightly better positioning and better awareness of where the enemies were, maybe, you could spend time even when you were low health contributing to the fight, because the attention wouldn't be on you, and you would be so far removed from your enemies, or so far removed from at least their attention, that you would be productive even when low. And that helps remove pressure and stress from your supports when they can take time to get over to you, you know? When a support can be like, okay, you can wait, I can heal up this other person first, because your positioning is good enough to give them reprieve, to make it so that the enemies won't kill you as quickly, you know? And this is slightly map dependent, which is why we're going to be going over the maps and such to kind of learn the advantages and such. A shot. Roadhog coming from up top. Interesting. So, let's go back a few seconds and look at this from the overhead, so maybe we can get a slightly better idea of the fight as a whole. Part of understanding positioning in Overwatch is understanding where your team is, because everything in Overwatch is going to be relative to your team, right? If the tanks are holding far forward, it's not exactly safe to be super far back, because then if somebody can close that distance, you're pretty fucked. Your tanks can't get back to you for the most part. So spacing will always be relative to both your composition and the enemy composition, as well as the map. So that's why we're going to kind of get an overhead perspective to get an idea of what happens here and what maybe you can do a little bit better. So we're going to move it at 0.75 speed so that we don't have that droning, annoying sounds in the background at any point. So once you get the Mercy, the Ashe is going to rotate to the high ground. This is the pick you're going to get, and the Roadhog is going to move up to the high ground. So what I would say largely for this is that you're the furthest forward. And while this isn't something you're going to expect to happen in any game, you're never going to expect somebody to make that rotation when the rest of the team is at main choke. Being the furthest forward is always going to be a slight disadvantage in terms of being safe, you know? Because what's happening when you're the furthest forward, even if you have verticality, is that the enemies are going to come to you first. Even if you're above them, you're going to be the first one to be shooting at them. You're going to be the first one that they render in. You're going to be the first person that they see, give or take, unless you're doing specific actions to hide. So even though you have verticality, you're still right next to the Genji, right? You're right below him. You're a dash away. You're still within spam damage of the Sigma. The Zen could still discord you easily. And there's nothing in between you and them except this like little bridge that they might be able to just walk up the stairs if they really wanted to. So being aware of who's furthest forward, even with verticality involved, can be pretty important sometimes. Just for the simple factor of attention and focus, you know? It's not going to be as easy to hit you, and not everybody's going to look up, but once you start shooting, they're going to notice you pretty easily. And they're going to want to focus their attention on whoever's closest. A lot of people have the habit of just trying to aim at what's closest if they're not good at aiming, especially because it's easier to aim at things that are closer. You know, there's a certain range at where it's too close, but you know. Taking that sweet, sweet water gulp. I'm really curious of who's watching this live. Oh, this is still 0.75, Jesus Christ. So yeah, at the end there, they're kind of just two set in for the most part, so there's not a lot you can do. So the two things that I think should be taken from this are that your positioning in terms of paying attention to how far back your team is, or in what stage of the regroup period you're in. Like, are they just coming out of spawn? Are they here? Are we ready to push? It needs to be a little bit more pinpoint, and you need to balance your the risks you take based off that. Taking a duel is a risk. Whether or not you can win it is up to your skill and the opponent's skill, but it is still a risk nonetheless that they might get a lucky shot. I'll talk a lot about lucky shots because I feel like when you're thinking about certain things in Overwatch, you can remove the aspect of skill in some situations and just think of it as, well, if they got lucky, is this risk worth it, or is this something that I'm really getting value out of? You can use it as a way to, determine value like that. So just understanding that duels are an inherent risk and taking risks during regroup phases can be kind of dangerous, as well as the fact that playing closer to corners has higher value in terms of protecting your hitbox, as well as understanding positioning in terms of like I said, relative to your team, who's further forward than you. If somebody was to aggress on you, is there anybody within proxy to help you? It's not that easy for a Hammond to get the high ground in that tight choke unless you're an expert at maneuvering. So thinking in terms of relative to your team, positioning next to corners, and taking less risky duels or not taking risks during specific periods of the game would be my three main tools or tips, not tool. I don't know why I said I went to go say tool tips, but tool tips doesn't really make sense. So I'm gonna stop it there. I don't think 21 minutes is terrible, but I kind of repeat myself a few times. So just kind of don't get bogged down in the entirety of it and just try to focus on one thing at a time, so that you don't get overwhelmed and try to do too many things at once. That's all the VODs I have for now. So if I get any more, I'll do more streams. But for now, goodbye.